like to call to order the Jacksonville Planning Advisory Board meeting for October the 12th, 2020. We will stand up here shortly and we'll be led by the Pledge of Allegiance by Bob, followed by the invocation by Homer. And so please stand with me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for this chance to come together and do the business for the city of Jacksonville. We have so much to be thankful for, but we'd like to ask you to help us do what's best for the citizens of Jacksonville, help those in need of good health, help guide those in elected office to do what's right, help all those who serve in our city, county, state, and country. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm back in the chair here as chairman again. Yeah, so I'm following on the heels of Mr. Homer Spring, being, now he's vice chair. So thank you for being here. So I've been a part of this board for quite a while. Thank you for being here. If you need to come in, it's okay. So make sure, please turn your cell phones to silent, for this meeting. So before we start in, I do want to bring something to everybody's attention. When we get to the new business, I know there's an item down here, item E. It's going to be a discussion only for concerning a UDO text amendment for food trucks. So there's not going to be any public discussion about this. It's just more informational. There will be an opportunity as it comes back to us from the planning department to have some room for discussion on that. So I do welcome people who are here concerning that particular subject. So thank you for being here. We will take your input later on, but tonight, Mr. Ryan King and we'll be bringing that topic before us, I believe, and we'll have some discussion about that, and at least you're here to hear about it before. So we're not voting on anything, just let those people know that before it goes on to city council, just so it's going to be a discussion only for that. So just want to let you know that. So we're going to go ahead and move on. So I need the approval for tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Okay, so we have a motion by Mr. Homer, second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Al. Okay, those in favor, please raise your right hand. All right, great, thank you very much. All right, so last month we met on September 14th. We need a review and approval of the minutes from there. So if there is any changes or discussion of that, or bring it to our attention so this will become an official part of the record.
Move to accept.
Motion by Bob to accept.
Second.
The second by Mr. Homer Spring, and those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, so moved. All right, city council update. Mr. Bob Warden, good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The only thing that the city council has done in relation to y'all tonight is last meeting on September 22nd, we appointed Logan Sosa as the Water and Sewer Advisory Board's representative to the Planning Board, and he's filling an existing term that expires on June 30th of 2022. So, Logan, welcome, and hope you enjoy it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, glad to have you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, appreciate you. And thank you, Bob, for what you do for us. All right, I see there is no old business, so we'll go ahead and move on into the new business for the evening. The first item up is a text amendment, with the transportation impact analysis.
Good evening, Chairman, planning board members. It's nice to have a full board. We are at full 9 members for the first time in a while, so it's good to see everybody here tonight. We're at a full board nonetheless. We've got all seats that have been filled. Unfortunately, we do have one member not with us tonight, but we are at full deal. So the first agenda item tonight is a Unified Development Ordinance text amendment that would be revisions to Article 2.2, which is our common review procedures, and Article 5.6, transportation impact analysis. And as we show the board and city council every time we have a text amendment, to kind of brief everybody, what's the issue? And the issue is application completeness. Basically, that the ordinance, since it was adopted in 2014, requires a TIB submitted and finalized prior to the planning department receiving development applications. And historically, we've always kind of reviewed them concurrently. So we want to make a change to the Unified Development Ordinance that would allow that concurrent review that's been happening for years to occur anyhow. So it's really just a house cleaning item. And then the second part, as it relates to the code, is when the Unified Development Ordinance was amended or adopted back in 2014, there was some standards that were recommended to go into our Unified Development Ordinance admin manual. We've already moved those to the admin manual, so this would just basically be a process to remove it from the actual UDO, and it is now housed in the admin manual. So 2 very simple adjustments, and staff is in support of this. This was a staff request, and you'll see that the changes are on page 12 under number 4, and then removing the required TIE contents because those are in the UDO admin manual. One thing that I will point out, while this is going to be allowed if approved, we just would caution the engineers, surveyors, development community that this could create an additional review, additional plan changes, because changes may occur after the TIA is completed. And after you go beyond your first 2 reviews, there is additional review fees. So it could cost additional review fees. So, but we want them to have this as an opportunity if that's the route they decide to go down. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
This is just really to bring things in line with how it's already being done.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the UDO text amendment found on attachment A. This amendment is consistent with adopted plans as the TIA requirements and thresholds are not changing. The amendment advances to public interest by providing flexibility within the development application process.
We have a motion by Mr. Hummer.
Second the motion.
We have a second by Mr. Steve. Is there any further discussion the board would like before we take a vote? Hearing none, those in favor of this motion, please raise your right hand. All right, that motion does pass. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
That's a great way to kind of clean that all up, so that's a good job. All right, so item number B concerns to another UDO text amendment concerning bicycle and pedestrian facilities.
So the issue is sidewalks within the ETJ. This is a request that's coming from staff after conversations with city management that sidewalks that the city has historically required in the ETJ are unable to be maintained by the city. We cannot use tax dollars to maintain the infrastructure. As a result, we are basically bringing forth a change that would eliminate the requirement for sidewalks, bicycle, pedestrian facilities from any development within the ETJ. So if it's a development in the ETJ and it's not going to be annexed, we would not require those sidewalks or biker pedestrian facilities. And you'll notice, and this was probably one of the very first ones under the recommendation, that it is not consistent with the Jacksonville Bicycle and Pedestrian Transportation Plan. That plan is actually bigger than the city and ETJ. It's actually the MPO boundary, which is our transportation planning boundary, which goes beyond those areas. So they identify pedestrian needs throughout. However, we believe that it does advance the public interest because of the safety concern that we have with our inability to maintain those sidewalks. So basically, pretty straightforward. We will no longer be requiring sidewalks in those areas if this amendment passes. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Will this require a map change?
Also be pointed out that we're shrinking our ETJ.
We have been. I think 5 or 6 reductions have occurred over the past, since 2017 or 2015, one of the two. So a lot of those areas have already been removed from our control to begin with. Now, if a site's going to be annexed, then this would still apply.
In an area where you have required it, will you maintain the sidewalks at that point?
for those areas that have already done it?
We are unable to do that.
Explain.
We cannot spend tax dollars on areas outside the corporate limits. Now, it's possible that DOT, in some areas, if it was part of a DOT project, then they may maintain them, but
What about immediate future plans where the money's been already allocated by DOT? Will those be canceled as well?
if it's part of a DOT project, they will probably be installed by DOT.
Okay. Okay.
We'll do a follow-up question to Bob's question. So we don't, or we have not had any sidewalks that would have been required by the city that have gone in developments in the ETJ.
Oh, we have required them for my 20 years here.
Right.
We just have the inability to maintain them.
Okay.
All right, any other further questions?
I would say that that probably exceeds the 20 years that you've been here. I'd say it's been going on for quite a while.
I don't disagree there at all. I know it's been happening for 20, so it's at least 20.
Especially when in the past, being in the ETJ was a forerunner of being annexed. You didn't want to wait until they were in the city to require people to put in sidewalks. And so back then, it sounded like a reasonable thing to do. Now it doesn't. I mean, I understand fully what you're doing, because it seems rather unfair to make someone put in sidewalks that's in the ETJ just because they're in the ETJ, for us to make them put in a sidewalk when we can't, even repair it if it gets ripped up or torn up.
And the annexation laws today are a lot different than what they were 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this will result really in a little bit of a savings for the developments or businesses that are in the ETJ.
That is correct.
We won't be requiring them to do like the sidewalk to nowhere that we've seen sometimes.
That is correct.
So I'd like to hear a motion, please.
I recommend that
Thank you,
we,
Steve.
the planning board, forward to council to approve the UDO text amendment found in attachment A, in that this will eliminate the bicycle and pedestrian facility requirements for developments within the ETJ.
Okay. That was well put. All right, do I have a second?
We need the plan consistency, public interest as part of the general statutory requirements. Sorry.
So you want to add to that's in the best interest of the public? Right?
And that this will be in the best interest of the public.
All right, so we have a motion by Mr. Steve. Here a second? Thomas? Second by Mr. Thomas. All right. All right, hearing, any other discussion before we vote? Hearing none, please raise your right hands on this, please. Those in favor? All right, see none opposed. Very good, so this passes. Excuse me. Okay, item number C is a special use permit type 3 site plan, daily mini storage at 175 Freedom Way. Jeremy, how you doing?
Doing well.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of
welcome.
the Planning Advisory Board. As stated, this is at 175 Freedom Way. This is a special use permit and type 3 site plan request from Bailey and Associates for a proposed 98,143 square foot self-service storage, or as we say usually, self-storage, mini storage. This location, as you may know, is the former Kmart at Piney Green Shopping Center. It's currently empty. Current zoning is corridor commercial, and within the corridor commercial zoning, mini storages or personal storage is a special use and requires city council approval. All the surrounding zoning is corridor commercial. On the map before you, or the screen before you, is the site plan where they propose to, the only site change is to redo the dry aisle to allow for a unloading or pickup area in front of this building as they upfit it for climate control storage. Parking currently exceeds the UDO. However, the improvements that they are proposing to this building will not require any parking compliance. Currently does not trigger landscaping compliance out of our Article 7 nonconformities. No additional landscape buffering is required as all adjacent properties are zoned alike. Staff is recommending approval of this request with findings of fact A through G being found in the affirmative. And the approval creates a value service to the community. Representatives from Bailey and Associates and Parker and Associates, who is the applicant's design professional, along with staff, will be happy to answer any questions that the board may have tonight.
I'm assuming even though they don't have to make any parking lot improvements, there will probably be some cleaning up of the way it looks now.
With any new certificate of occupancy of a building, if current parking, painting, striping isn't up to par, that is a requirement of occupying a building. Signage obviously will be coming into compliance. Any new lighting, anything new would have to adhere to UDO standards. There's just that cost factor of your tax value ratio versus your improvements. Being such a large site, a shopping center, there's a high tax value on this. So there's a high ceiling of improvements allowance before that compliance is triggered.
So with this being a proposed self-storage, is there like a admin office going to be part of this? Some type of administrative office?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The applicant is welcome to add that, but I'm fairly adamant that there will be an internal office.
Do you have any other questions? Anyway. Silence here. Any other questions? Not.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, Mr. Homer's gonna, I'm sorry. No, not Mr. Homer.
Sandy.
I am, Mr. Sandy, I'm sorry. I knew I was
Approve the
gonna
special-
do that eventually, okay.
That we approve the special use permit type 3 site plan based on findings of facts A through G being found in the affirmative.
So we have a motion.
Second.
Second? Okay, Mr. Homer. All right, any other discussion about this? Hearing none, please raise your hands, please, in support. All right, everybody's supportive, okay, good. Well, I'm glad to see somebody do something, make something of this space.
Yep. Yes.
So I'm happy for you, so.
Very much so.
Anyway, it'd be great. All right, thank you, Jeremy, on this one. All right, we're gonna move forward to the next item. D is a map amendment over on Sunset Road.
So before I move on to this, one thing I'll note, and for the audience at home, in my 11 years here, only 3 original board members. The board has changed drastically, and what brings that to mind is the properties in this next case, next request, 202 and 204 Sunset Road. This particular rezoning has been in front of this board, about 5 years ago, I believe. There was a request in 2014-6 to change the property from RSF7 to corridor commercial. However, tonight's request is to change from RSF7 to conditional corridor commercial. The last time these two properties were before this board recommended approval of a straight rezoning from RSF7 to CC. It went to the city council and was tabled, deferred twice, so that the owner developer could work with the adjacent neighborhood to come up with some possible conditions on a conditional zoning. But at that time, the developer withdrew it. So fast forward 6 years later, this request is now back in front of you as a conditional corridor commercial conditional rezoning. Notice the property at 202 and 204 Sunset on the aerial. These are two vacant parcels immediately abutting the Moore Buick GMC facility, owned by the same owner. The existing zoning is RSF7, and there is CC zoning to the east, to the south, and RSF7 to the west and to the north. The CAMA future land use map, not correctly on this, but does not support this rezoning. It actually identifies these two tracts as low-density residential, and that is noted in the staff report that it could support this rezoning if staff is directed to update the CAMA land use at a future date. Before you on the screen is what the map would look like if this proposed rezoning was to move forward and be approved by City Council. Conditions that are being recommended or being proposed by the applicant as part of this request are 5, and I will go over them. One moment. They have a landscape and fencing proposed along Sunset Road of 10-foot low vegetative strip with a 6-foot opaque fence, and then the required type A 30-foot buffer along the rear of the site, adjacent to the residential zoning as well. They are also conditioning no access to Sunset Road. It would be all internal access from the adjacent same owned properties, to be used only for automotive rental and sales, and that security light pole height be a maximum of 15 feet high. City staff is recommending approval, and that the planning advisory move to recommend that the city council also approve this conditional rezoning to conditional corridor commercial zoning with findings of fact A, C, and D. I'm sorry. That should be A through J, or we will correct this. I do apologize. A, B, C, D, E. Let's see. Sorry for that, for the error in the staff report, but I'm sorry. Staff is recommending approval with findings of fact B through J being found in the affirmative, and that findings of fact A would be found affirmative if staff is directed to update the CAMA. So again, the recommendation is to approve with findings of fact B through J being found in the affirmative, and A would be found affirmative if staff is directed to update the CAMA. And the representative of the applicant, Mr. John L. Pierce, is here, and he, along with staff, would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So you've made the correction on the recommendation from the city staff?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
When, with many staff reports, we like to reuse what we had before because it remains consistent. But since this first went in front of the board, we've started using the findings of fact as identified in the UDO, which is the correct way to do it. And the UDO has A through J findings of fact. And the A is the land use plan affirmative statement. And as stated before, this project is not supported by the CAMA, but a future amendment to the CAMA land use plan would make that affirmative.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted clarification. Do we have any questions from the board?
Jeremy?
Yes.
The neighbors, the residents along Sunset Road think about the plan as proposed?
They have not had that opportunity. We do not, we made the change about 2 years ago that we do not send out the courtesy notices for Planning Advisory Board because we do not hold a public hearing. We believe that we will be directed to request that the applicant hold a neighborhood meeting so that those in the area will be able to attend and discuss what the plan looks like. That way, when it goes in front of the city council in November, as it's currently scheduled, any issues will be kind of hammered out. But they could still have issue. But these conditions bring home a lot of the concerns they had 6 years ago: light intrusion, access on the Sunset Road, and clear buffering to them with the fencing and the vegetation.
I was gonna say, that's probably one of the biggest differences between this request and the last one. This is a conditional request. And, talking about the error in the staff report, I mean, Jeremy worked with Mr. Pierce till the last second before we printed the agenda packets, and we apologize for that being missed, but it really was partially because we spent as much time as we could at the end to try to get something that we could support, and the applicant agreed to a change to conditional, and address the concerns that staff recalled from 6 years ago. So we think this is a much better application that addresses those items, unlike the previous application.
It would seem to me that it's very reasonable in as much as they've already encroached further back into the subdivision than this little piece would encroach. In addition to that, you're gonna enter only from the existing mower's property, so it seems like to me it's a reasonable way to do it.
Mr. Chairman, I've always had concerns about, business encroaching into residential areas. I know that, this is will be about an acre altogether, and you're gonna create a impervious surface when you make that a parking lot, correct?
That's what yes, sir.
So, right now, it's just vacant land.
That's correct. It did, 6 years ago, there were 2 homes on there that have since been demolished.
And, I know this area has had a history, maybe not as bad as I think, but there was a time when, the people in this area had some septic problems, and we had to, when we annexed them into the city, that was one of the reasons we were able to, that we did that. So I would bet you're probably gonna have to address some drainage issues
Yes.
to the
that would
residents.
be
There are gonna
part
be
of-
people that will probably say, well, it doesn't drain well now, and it won't drain better when you create this acre.
Yes, sir.
I like the fact that you've blocked it off from, entrance into Sunset Road. I'm still a little uncomfortable with it going that far back into the residential area, but, and I'm glad that you've addressed the lighting situation. And I think if you can get the drainage, again, it's gonna be, when you have a public hearing, you're gonna have somebody that's gonna come up and say, you know, my land doesn't drain very well now, and it won't drain any better. We had a similar situation in Branchwood, in the shopping center in Branchwood, when the area near the, at the front of Branchwood Shopping Center didn't drain very well, and they put basically I guess they used to have an academy there, but they put a spot at the top, and it didn't help it any better, and to this day, you can go out there and drive through the water. So, good luck.
Okay. Any other issues anyone brings up? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that the Planning Advisory Board move to recommend that items B through J, that the city approve the conditional rezoning requests based on the finding and facts, A and F, is that right?
B through J are affirmative. A would be affirmative if staff is directed
If
to.
staff,
Yep.
yes.
To amend the CAMA land use plan.
Found it in the affirmative. Finding the facts B will make the rezoning consistent if staff is directed to update CAMA. Did I get all the alphabets in the right place? The rezoning,
A is the one related to
A is
CAMA.
actually-
A is the
they haven't
not
changed it
supported
to A.
one, so.
okay. So A goes where fact B
Yes,
is
sir.
written.
Yeah.
Facts A will make the rezoning consistent if staff is directed to update the CAMA. The rezoning advances the public's interest by creating more development opportunities.
All right. So we have a motion by Mr. Al. Have a second?
Second?
Second by Steve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, raise your hand in favor of this, please. All right, you have 1, 2, but keep your hands up, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Guys have 4. Those opposed? 1, 2, 3. All right. We have 4 to 3. Let's move on. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you again, and I apologize again to give out the confusion on the staff report.
So, as it was such a close vote on this one, I would, like I said, be prepared when you get before city council, because a lot of questions are gonna come up again, as it has in the past. All right, so we are going to move on to item E, and like I said earlier, this is just a discussion, some information Mr. Ryan's gonna bring to us. And, in the future, there's obviously this item is gonna come back before us, and then we'll go on before, to city council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item E is a discussion for potential changes to the Unified Development Ordinance as it relates to food trucks. City staff has received a request by a citizen or a group of citizens that are requesting this change. We have taken their request. We have met with them and basically identified some things that staff could support. I think that they were very amenable to those items. There were a few things that they had some questions and concerns about that are more related to application process, fees, locations. As it relates to those fees, those aren't items that are necessarily factored by the Planning Advisory Board, but those are items that we did hear and we will address. But basically, you have an applicant requested change. Staff analyzed it. We came up with a proposal. We discussed this with the planning board, with the applicants, and now we're here to discuss it with the planning board. We'll do the same with city council next week. And then based on any feedback, which we're soliciting the board and city council to give us tonight and next week, we will incorporate that into a final draft for an ordinance that we will bring back to you. Our plan is to bring it back to you in your November meeting, and then to bring it to city council at their second meeting in November. And that night, action could be taken and the ordinance amended. So, a couple of things, staff is recommending that we create an overlay district. So there'll be a rezoning request involved. And basically, we're gonna identify on a map locations where, if the property's zoned corridor commercial or industrial, that a food truck could operate. And I'll show you a map of that area here in a minute. We will create an application that each food truck vendor would have to apply. We'd create standards, and we're getting ready to get into those here in just a second. One of the standards would be, as I mentioned, the corridor commercial industrial zone. So we're not proposing that they could set up in a residential zone. It would have to be corridor commercial or industrial zoning to set up there. These annual permits and fees would be from a July 1, basically our fiscal year, July 1 to the end of June 30th. Those will be good annually. So if you come in December, they will be good until the end of June. And they're not transferable. And we are looking at this as a pilot program. So let's say that the planning board, city council says, okay, we don't like this. We're going to basically back this up. Those permits would be valid for the year or however much time they have left. They would be able to continue operating until that permit expired. Because once we give a permit, it's valid for however long that permit is valid for. So in this case, it would be good throughout until the end of that fiscal year. So the standards that we've talked about, and some of these may have come from the applicant, some of these may have been ones that staff came up with, or a little bit of both, is obviously the applicant, the food truck vendor, would have to obtain the permission from the property owner. They'd have to get a permit from the city. And that's, like I said, good for 1 year. And that's good for any site, provided it meets the standards. So they won't have to, if they have 5 sites they want to set up, they won't have to get 5 different permits. They will get 1. Make sure that they have all health department approvals, because they are regulated by the Onset County Health Department. We expect all equipment to be inspected and in proper working condition. So a lot of these units, if they got a hood system, it's got to be inspected by the fire officials in the health department, just like any other restaurant would have to be. We want to make sure that these food vendors are not located in any public or private right-of-way. So it would be on private property. We want to make sure that they do not obstruct drive aisles for the motoring public, fire lanes, or fire hydrants for obvious reasons. We want to make sure that our emergency service personnel can respond, whether it be to them or to the business that they are locating, with, if it's a business open for operation. We expect them to have waste containers set up while they are using the site on a daily basis, and that they shall be disposed of on a daily basis. I want to make sure that the site remains clean. Outdoor seating is prohibited. We want to make sure that this is literally, you're there today, you go tonight, you might be back tomorrow, you might be in a different location, but no outdoor seating. Permanent site alterations are prohibited. Once again, this is kind of a temporary use. We don't expect to see site alterations made. Sites will be cleaned daily or nightly. Some may be operating during the day, not at night. Some might do night, not during the day, or vice versa. But we expect it to basically be, when you leave, there's no evidence that you were there that day. Items cannot be stored overnight. Once again, it's a mobile type business. That's what we expect to see. The food vendors, and they may be trucks or tow behind trailers, whatever it may be, they cannot be parked within or on sidewalks or required landscaped areas, such as landscaped islands or buffers. So if it's a requirement of UDO, you can't put something over top of those areas. We want to make sure that the landscaping stays living and it's serving its functions. Any lighting that they may have on the truck or trailer needs to be dark sky compliant, which means it's got to be a U rating 0, which means it needs to basically be parallel to the ground and cannot be modified. It needs to be level, perpendicular, parallel to the ground. Amplified or audible sounds or devices are prohibited. Obviously, a lot of these are going to be run off a generator, so the generator noise is going to be kind of expected with these units. We just want to have amplified music, sounds, or whatever to kind of draw attention, so that would be prohibited. Signage standards. Limited to what's on the food truck or trailer, except for one 5-foot by 5-foot A-frame sign within 20 feet of the food truck or trailer. Whether that be their hours, or whether they're going to be tomorrow, or whether it's what they're selling tonight, what their special is today, whatever it may be, a 5-foot by 5-foot A-frame sign, and then whatever they have on their truck or trailer. Make sure that, this isn't something that they requested, but, you know, when we look at these things, we look at the what-if scenario, what could we see? And, we don't want to see any electronic or changeable message signs on the trailer or truck. That's like you see the electronic digital signs, you know, that are permanent. We don't want them on the truck or trailer. We don't allow our business to have them on the walls right now either. So, really, it's no different than how we treat our bricks and mortar customers. Flashing signs are prohibited. That would involve lighting. We don't allow anything to flash, so we want to make sure that there's no flashing signs associated with these food vendors. And I mentioned the overlay district. Basically, the overlay district, the yellow area on the map before you is our ETJ, the area on the inside, which is your corporate limits. And if you'll notice here, there's a green line that basically identifies where a food vendor can be set up in those zones. Let's see if I can get this to, media, can you help me to where I can annotate it? While I'm waiting for them, Wilmington Highway, you'll notice that there's a green line from basically the air station entrance to the bypass. There's an area which is where there's a flea market set up on Richlands Highway. They're already set up there. It's an old non-conforming situation. So we've identified that area as well, just because people have been setting up there for years anyhow. So, hold on. The next area is the New River Shopping Center area. All right. Just wanting to advance the slide. All right, so there's your first green area. The second area right here, Richlands Highway, which is where the flea market is. The New River Shopping Center right here in the middle. Lejeune Boulevard from Northeast Creek all the way to right here near downtown. Bell Fork Road. The center White Street area where you have the industrial park. We thought that there could be, you know, some demand there, being that there's not a whole lot of restaurants in that area, and there's also employment centers, so there could be some benefit there. And then also you'll see the last area that we have identified is your North Marine Boulevard corridor from about McDaniel Drive out to the ETJ boundary. So those are the areas that we've identified for this first amendment for a pilot program. So only within those areas, if it's zone industrial or corridor commercial, is where the food vendors with the proper permits could set up. And with that being said, that's kind of the synopsis of the discussions and the application made. We'd be happy to hear any feedback that the planning board may have, any suggestions, thoughts, things that we should incorporate into the actual text when we bring it forward to you next month.
Just, can you define food truck?
There will be a definition, there's already a definition in the Unified Development Ordinance, but basically just a mobile food vendor.
Okay, so what's the difference between a food truck and an ice cream truck?
There's not a difference if you set up on private property, because then it's a land use issue. An ice cream truck that goes up and down the road, that is a police matter. That's in the city code, and it's not something that land use regulates. That's a different side of the house, different codes, different rules, different enforcement.
Okay, and probably one more. So the overlay zone are the only areas that someone has selected that these food trucks can do business in?
That is an area that staff selected for a pilot program.
Okay, so at some time in the future, this could be expanded?
It could be.
So what kept us from opening all the commercial areas?
Like I said, it's a pilot program. It doesn't mean that it'll stay this way. It certainly could expand.
Okay.
It could shrink. It could go away. The board could say, open it up. I mean, you have the ability to make a recommendation as you see fit. We look at this as an opportunity to where, right now, you really, with the exception of the loophole that's been there for a long time, which is if you get under the building footprint, like the hot dog vendor that sets up under the canopy. Most of these food trucks and vendors, they can't make that work. It's almost impossible. I mean, park a food truck underneath that canopy, it's just not gonna work.
Right.
So this creates some areas where they could operate. And we tried to balance that between, okay, high visibility, traffic, but also we looked at where there's not necessarily restaurants, that there may be a restaurant need. I'm sure that the food vendors will say, well, we'd like to have it in more areas.
What, and that's why, that was my follow-up is, I'm just trying, I hope staff establish some kind of criteria to determine the overlay zone.
We did, basically, we looked at in terms of zoned appropriately, traffic, not a whole lot of restaurants to where there wouldn't necessarily be a competition. There may be some. Also, like, for example, this area right here, I think this area here kind of surprised some people, but you have an awful lot of car dealerships. They like having a lot of special events.
Okay.
So we could see them having food vendors to come out more so than what they would be able to have under a special event. Because special events, they can set up underneath special events already as well, like National Night Out, which was obviously different this year because of COVID, but Oktoberfest, all of those things, they're allowed to go because that's an exempt special event, or if it's an approved special event. We know that the mall has several of these special events every year. This would be to where I can go set up on a daily basis if I want to, or once a week.
This answer will come later. Last one, I promise.
No big deal. I'm here for you.
It's a discussion.
Threshold has been established as to when you may extend this overlay.
No. This is a test project. This is a pilot project.
All right, how long is this pilot project?
It could be 1 year, it could be 2 years. City council could say, hey, look, we've tried it for 6 months, take it away. That's why, let's say this gets adopted in November, and come May, we're back before you to undo this. Then the people that have that permit through the end of June, it'll stop in June. Now, if it doesn't stop before June 30th and they get a renewal for next year, and council or planning board, we pull back and say, no, we're not gonna do it anymore, they will be able to basically do this through that permit valid date.
I mean, that's part of my concern because, I mean, here you go, you have people that are buying the equipment, permits, going through the county, they've done all this, and then, and I know more information is coming, but we've got to make sure that that criteria is established before we say, oh, no, we're pulling the plug on it. We don't want your, look, I go on base every day. They're all over the base.
That's right.
All right, so.
So I would say that.
So what I see is that you're trying to, I think as long as the intentions is good and that be successful, okay, that we're gonna be supportive of this, like you said, it's a pilot, you know, so that obviously there's certain things being regulated, being watched, make sure everybody's in compliance, and that's moving forward. I don't think this is something, you know, hang the carrot out there and dangle it and take it away. I think the role here is that we want this to be successful. They are business people. They depend on this as a livelihood, you know, so by keeping it initially small, we get to kind of see and kind of manage that, you know, hopefully not micromanage, but we keep it there because eventually you're gonna bring it back and say, okay, hey, we need to change a few things with this, maybe some of the rules a little bit. We've seen some of these hiccups and we'll smooth it all out. Just like introducing a new product anytime, you're gonna go through that little testing period, but hopefully we see this as a learning curve but it's also to make sure it continues, that we are supportive of their businesses so they do succeed. You know, I wouldn't want them going around in fear. Like he said, you invest, you buy the equipment, you put money into it, and all of a sudden we decide to pull the plug because it's like, we don't like this.
No, that's easy for us to say, but it's not easy for them to say.
Well, I know.
Right. There's two sides of that. So if they already have equipment, some people have already bought stuff knowing that they can't do work in Jacksonville. So they've already made that decision. If somebody new comes along and says, oh, I want to get in the food truck industry, and they buy that and they don't know about this discussion that it could be done away with in a year from now, Yeah, I think that speaks more to your issue, and that's why in the discussions that we've had, we've said, look, if you get a permit and it's valid through the end of June, if the code is taken away, you will at least have through the end of June. And if you get a new permit for the next year and it's valid until 2022, because, it's like the sidewalk stuff tonight. There's been an awful lot of sidewalk installed, and then if council makes the change, the next person doesn't have to put in that infrastructure that a lot of other people have had to. Codes can change, and there's a risk there with everybody. I mean, we make things non-conforming, we try not to, but anytime you have a UDO adoption, you've created some non-conformities. We try to lessen those. But I think it's one of those things to where, and we can even maybe put something on the application, that this is only good until this time. Ordinances can change. This can be done away with. So I think that as long as that's kind of understood, I think most of the people that are asking for it, they've already made that investment. It would be somebody that hasn't made the investment, that makes the investment, and then we change the code, that I think would have a better argument. These folks already have the equipment. They're just trying to get into the area, just like you said on base. They're trying to open up the grounds in which they can do business.
Is there going to be a special portion for, say, the recreational areas? Tournaments at Northeast Creek Park, Jacksonville Commons?
Special event. If it is a special event, there's already provisions for this.
Ryan? Oh, go ahead. Ryan, take me through I like what you've done about the overlay area. Take me through the thought process of not choosing a place like New Market Square across from Jacksonville High School. Big parking area, largely vacant. I could see a monster or a good thing showing up, every home Friday football game you've got when we start having football. You've got food trucks in that parking lot, and you've got kids, and I'm saying, if that were a choice, was that part of your consideration? You've also got 3 or 4 restaurants in there now that may be struggling to survive.
And the landlord may not let them operate there even if we added it to the area. Mm-hmm. I mean, we tried to identify areas where you had heavily concentration of corridor commercial and industrial zoning, not residential. And also visibility, high traffic, access. And also we looked at, are there bricks and mortar restaurants in these areas? I think if you look, there's a lot of them that are not there. But this was what staff came up with in an attempt to create a pilot program. Could it be expanded? Absolutely, it could be expanded. The planning board may say you want to see that area added to it. You have the ability to make that as a recommendation. We didn't, as your staff, we did not, because we looked at this as a trial project. I mean, city council could say, let it go anywhere, as long as it's zone industrial or quarter commercial.
I have a question. So I do think there should be some guidelines where they can set up in those areas, so there's not competing directly with a brick and mortar right next to them. Like on Lejeune, for instance, there's Bojangles and stuff. If someone sold chicken and biscuits, they shouldn't be able to park right next to them, the Verizon parking lot, or if they're in the dollar store or whatever, and sell competed to a brick and mortar restaurant. I mean, the brick and mortars, they're there, they have a very heavy investment in land and lease, and so I think it's a good idea to have food trucks. I just think there'd be some guidelines how close they can get to a competitor. I think that would be a fair thing for everybody. Same thing what you said about Kmart, old Kmart shopping center, to put a sub food truck right in front of substational, wouldn't be a very good idea. So I think there's some guidelines and some restrictions there. Besides that, I think it'd be a good idea.
That's actually one of the things that we looked at. If you look at some of the other surrounding municipalities on their standards, they've got measurements from the front door of another restaurant. To be honest with you, the reason why we didn't add anything about that, I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but the reason why we didn't add that is, enforcement. We're gonna go out there and measure, well, you're 74 feet, you gotta be 75, you need to move over a foot.
Just put it in reverse and slide back.
Right. The way we looked at that is, well, if you're on a piece of property, then the landlord is going to give you permission. If they have 3 restaurant tenants and they want you to be there, then they'll deal with that with their other tenants. As far as the adjoining property, once again, we looked at it. Most of the things that we saw in other areas was like 75 or 50 feet from the front door. Mm-hmm. If we applied a standard like that, well, they're going to meet it even if they're on the property next door. So we eliminated to We decided to not even create a standard that we would have to measure. It certainly could be added, whether it be 50 feet, 100 feet, 300 feet. I mean, it can be whatever you want to. And if that's something the board wants to see, we'll add a distance requirement from another restaurant, whatever that dimension is. But then you get into an enforcement issue, and we try to keep things very understandable, easy, and basic. And now we're gonna have to get the wheel out and measure. How close are you to that location? And that's why we chose not to include it. We certainly could have, we looked at that, but we chose not to do that. And I think that kind of ties back into, if you look at the locations. Where we've added, I'm not saying that there's not a few restaurants in these areas, but let's look at the one right here in the middle in New River Shopping Center. That's on the shopping center parcel. If the owners of Northwood Shopping Center want to allow a food truck to set up and they have a restaurant, that's their decision. We don't have to get into a measurement game. That's between two tenants, the food truck tenant and the restaurant tenant. Along Wilmington Highway, there's 1 or 2 restaurants within that corridor. North Marine Boulevard, there's only, I know of 2, 3, I mean, depending on which area, I mean, there's not a whole lot of restaurants within that corridor. There's some, there's not a whole lot. And so that measurement piece, I think this overlay kind of deals with that issue without having a specified dimensional standard.
I guess I'm just like for the future, like if they just, I guess go down Western Boulevard or some of the major areas like that, but I guess you'd be back to shopping centers and regulations there too.
Yeah, I mean, we would be back, and so if we're gonna expand that, that's something we could certainly add then, we can add it now, it's just an enforcement piece, and we chose to leave that off based on our strategy with the pilot program locations.
And with the pilot program, you were saying that within 6 months or so, city council could take, is there also an option where within 3 or 4 months, they could get it expanded even more, these areas?
Absolutely.
So they could request for more areas within a few months if everything's going well? And then have
they
a
could.
discussion again, and so they don't have to wait a whole year for the fiscal year to be over before we talk about this again?
Well, the fiscal year, keep in mind, is just the permit. How long is the permit good for? This may not change for 2 years. It may not change for 5 years. It may be retracted in a year and a half. They just wanted to make sure that if they paid, let's say hypothetically, they paid the city a $400 permit to be a food vendor in the city, they didn't want that taken away in 2 months. They wanted some assurances that that permit would be good for X time period. And that X time period would be through the end of June every year. When we bring this back, whether we want to expand, contract, I don't know whether it'll be 6 months, it'll be 2 years. I mean, they could petition again.
But they have the option to petition again. They don't have to wait a
Petitioning
long
to make this
time.
code change, they can petition to change the overlay district.
Okay.
Anybody has that ability. They pay an application fee, go through the process, go to the planning board and city council.
But let's suppose in March or February, city council decides to open up more areas. The permits they get in March or February will only be good until June.
That's right. But then they would be in for a renewal.
Yeah.
I don't think it's an issue if the area stays or expands. I think the bigger issue is that if you do away with this, if I come in at the beginning of June and I get a permit, it's good for 1 month. That's probably not a good example. Let's say that I get a permit on June 1 of next year, or July 1 of 2021, and council changes this in October. Well, I just paid full permit price and I get 3 months. No, you'll get it through June. So it's good for 1 year. But it's not a 1 year from the time you get the permit issued, it's based on a July 1 to June 30th timeframe. So anybody that gets a permit after this is adopted will be back in here getting one before July 1 of next year, regardless of when you get your first one.
Is the permit site attached?
No, it's good for anywhere that's zoned industrial, quarter commercial, and in this overlay. One application is good for any site as long as you meet those criteria. We also looked at, we looked at the owner, the property owner's got to get a permit, and your food vendor has to for every single location. And we didn't do that. We said, you get your owner permission, have a notarized letter that's with you that shows you have permission, and then you have one permit. And that covers you for every location you set up in the city of Jacksonville, not on a case-by-case basis. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not gonna be talking to them about, was this property zoned appropriately? Is this a required landscaped area? Jeremy and I are gonna be talking with them as questions that may come up. But they will get one application for anywhere in the city that's allowed. Whether it's this overlay, or whether it's expanded, or whether it's contracted, it's good for any of those locations.
But it's entirely possible that I could get a permit thinking I'm gonna set up in one location, and then the city comes around and says, okay, we're gonna contract, and that's not a location anymore, and I'll have to go somewhere else.
That's correct.
I have two questions. One might be a dumb question, but can they sell alcohol? Can food trucks sell alcohol?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
'Cause I just didn't know how that would work in certain areas, you know, especially with people drinking, what the limit, I don't know if that I guess it falls all under ABC permits and rules.
That is, I mean, that would be a state rule. I don't know the answer. That's a good question. I can make an assumption, but that's all it would be.
I was just curious about that. My other question was, now I forgot what my other question was. Too young for that. Well, if it comes back to me, I guess I'll ask again.
All right, I'll give you a chance to
There
think
you
for a
go.
second.
All right, thank you.
Ryan, I can presume that, that the request for this, to look at it from a city perspective, probably came from the folks, that have, food trucks and wanted to do business that way. Did the city get any, request, interest, from the side of, and I'll call it the food desert areas, where we had areas saying, hey, look, we'd really love food trucks to come in this area because we're restaurant poor here?
No, this request has come from those that own food trucks.
I remember my question. Now, is the property owner liable if anything happens, if that food truck is parked on his property and something happens, is that owner of that property gonna be responsible for anything?
I
How
don't
does
sell
that-
insurance, so I'm not sure.
Well, I
I
just didn't
think
know how
that
that
the
would
owner,
work
they may be, the
Okay.
food truck business may be insured. I'm not sure. That's a question that the landowners will have to, they'll have to weigh that in before they let somebody set up or not. That's gonna be on between them and their insurance provider.
And also there may be some restrictive covenants in the lease for that area.
That's right. And the city will not get involved with that. I mean, if the landowner gives them permission, you would hope that they don't allow somebody to go in there that would be in contradiction of their restrictive covenants that they've created for their tenants. But hey, we had a steakhouse built one time and it didn't last very long. Apparently there was a restrictive covenant that said, no, you can't have a steakhouse there. And the city had nothing to do with that. We permitted them and we inspected them and they were open for several years. That was a court case, that was a private matter.
I guess I have one more question, sorry, full of it. So have the food people that are here, I'm assuming it's you guys over there, do y'all already have protected areas where you guys wanna set up? Like, have you already talked to landowners and all that stuff? They already had like designated areas and places where y'all wanna go?
I've done one in the city, it was at Swanix, quickly shut down.
Excuse me, we're not gonna allow those discussions here.
Oh, I
Okay?
thought I asked questions.
That's right, this is just a discussion and so.
I thought you said we
amongst us.
asked, they could answer.
We'll ask those
Oh, I'm
questions of the
sorry.
vendors next time, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
All right.
But I think it's safe to assume that, I mean, there's locations where they would like to operate. That's why they made this application request.
So, yeah, save questions like that, we'll bring forward, if we're coming back in November, bring that, because then I am gonna give you all the permission to come up, because there's, obviously, this is discussion. It also gives you the ability to kind of know what, we're thinking, and also, obviously, you're reaching out to, Mr. Ryan, his staff, everybody in the city, to help you in this whole process. So, have those questions to bring for next time, because when we do, then we'll hear all those, from you. And then, of course, then we'll make our recommendation. And we are a recommending body, we're an advisory committee, okay? And then it goes right on up to city council. So everything we're trying to help you here, bring the next time with you too, that gives us more information. So that when we pass up people, like Bob Borden and everybody on city council, it's gonna help you immensely, I can tell you, okay?
I would also add that, just like we might think of areas that would make good candidates for, food trucks. There are probably places out there that we haven't thought of that, when presented with the right kind of evidence or, some kind of, some backstory to it, might elicit city council to add some other places. Just be prepared to, if you're gonna propose someplace that, in this trial stage, if you're proposing someplace that you actually have some things that will support, the argument.
I might add that we're gonna hear from, some brick and mortar restaurants too opposing this, so, there are gonna be some, and y'all probably will too when it comes up for consideration, so just be aware of that too.
Yeah, and that's some of the stuff, I mean, we're trying to juggle. We understand that there's arguments on both sides. And we looked at this as a pilot program. It's a win-win situation, at least from our standpoint, is that we're providing some areas, not a whole lot of competition with the bricks and mortars, at least geographically. That doesn't mean that they won't say, well, it's still in competition with us, but at least geographically, if you look at these areas, there's not a whole lot. So in essence, it is a food desert, even though they haven't said, hey, look, we want to be here. I mean, I think the center of White Street area, you got Standardine, you've got Omega, and some of those other folks having a location there, that may be a great thing for everybody involved. Ferguson, MSA, they may not have, they can run and grab a quick bite. They come set up in their parking lot and feed the troops.
The published map for locations that they can set up in?
This map will be incorporated into the official zoning map, just like our billboard overlay, adult business overlay, downtown mural overlay. This will be flight path overlay. It will be incorporated into the official zoning map. So this will be available. Whether it looked like this, whether there are areas added, taken away. This was just our attempt. And I can tell you there's the first area, New River Shopping Center, that wasn't on staff's original request. The city manager says, hey, I think you need to add that. We added that. The North Marine Town Center corridor, I think there were some questions, why add that area? And I'm like, well, there's really not a whole lot of restaurants, and you've got a lot of auto dealerships, and they like having special events. Could be a win-win for both the auto dealers and the food truck industry.
Something we hadn't talked about though, it hadn't been brought up, the fees are gonna be part of it. One of the things is, how do we make sure that, we're treating everybody fairly? We're treating the bricks and mortars, and we're treating the trucks folks the same. And so here's a brick and mortar who's paying property taxes based on, an appraisal. We're gonna have to figure out how, some way that we're doing something comparable for a food truck. So that we don't discriminate, and so that we're making sure that we're being fair and equal to all parties. So that fee schedule will be something that probably will get a lot of attention by city council, would be my guess.
Yeah, that's a great point, and we plan to do that, and that was a discussion that we had with the food truck vendor group that we met with here in council chambers, and that's something where the fee schedule amendment is, the fee schedule is adopted by city council with the budget process every year, so obviously we're gonna make a change to that, and those are items that Councilman Warden just pointed out that we will factor in. One of the things that we talked about, and we didn't have that for the discussion just because that won't be before the board, but it's a good point, good background information on whether you have a commissary inside the city or not. A commissary is somewhere where they basically, I believe it's to store food, but also to clean the utensils, and they have to basically be associated with what they call a commissary, which is a commercial grade kitchen. So there are commissaries in the city limits. So if there are commissaries located there, then there may be one fee schedule versus if somebody has one in the county, might be a different fee schedule. But that's things that we're looking at in conjunction with this. So you'll have a rezoning with the map amendment, you'll have a text amendment, you'll have a fee schedule amendment. There's 3 or 4 parts, an application process that will all be tied in together, even though you're only seeing 2 parts. There may be these other 3, third and fourth part that the board doesn't have to act on, that we are gonna have to deal with. And we're in the process of kind of setting that up now.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the commissaries are required by the health department, is that correct?
That's the way I understand, yes.
Okay.
anything else? That's some good talk. So, anyway, so we're looking forward to coming back to this next month and bringing more to us so we can move ahead on this one. So thanks, Ryan, for your time and energy. And it sounds like you all put a lot of work into this, and I appreciate that. So I know there's been some thought process going on, some stuff that was sent out to us to kind of get a little idea a few months ago. So I did kind of brush up on that one. So I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right. All right, so we're into the new business. We'll move on to reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have the PowerPoint for you tonight, but from what I understand, the census has been extended, so I think this is the 4th or 5th month in a row that we've talked about. Make sure that if you haven't completed the census, that you go online, call the 800 number, and take care of that, because it is a big deal for Onslow County as it relates to representation and also financially. So please get that census done if you haven't already done so. Remind your friends, colleagues, neighbors to get that done. That's all that I have.
Okay. All right, so I'm glad you brought that up, because that was going to be part of my closing comments, I guess, before I ask for a motion to adjourn. So once again, I would encourage all those people who are actually watching us to get out and complete that census. We've been trying to talk about, get information out. Please go online, look it up. You don't have to have an identification number, as Ryan's pointed out many times, and fill that out, because that impact, financial impact on this county is immense. So sometimes I know we get a little lackadaisy about it, and my vote don't count, or my input information doesn't count. Well, it does count. You know, whether you believe it or not, it has an impact of everything in this community. So please, please, please move forward. So I'm glad to hear there was an extension. So I have a sign up in my business, you know, that I have filled that out. So hopefully a lot of people who come in and out of my business, they see that. I want to thank everybody on the board for being here and for participating and all that you do. I want to thank the planning department. You guys do such a great job bringing us a lot of good information. I know you put a lot of hard work in behind the scenes, and I want to thank Bob Borden being our liaison for the city council, because they do such a great job. So I've been on this board for a long time, and I've been so supportive, and I appreciate that. And then on a final note, I would encourage everybody, every citizen in Onslow County and anyone who's listening, to get out. We have a major election coming up in November. I'm not here to politicize. I don't, this is an individual decision. But please, 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 that's the rights we have right here in the United States of America, to vote. To vote. If you don't think one vote can't make the difference, then rethink. Go back and look at some history. One vote can make a world difference. So I would encourage those. I don't care what your political affiliation or what you believe in. Please go out and vote. This is major, okay? We do this every 4 years. Please, 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 take pride in the fact that you have the freedom right here in the United States of America to get out and vote. So that's only coming up in a few weeks. So that's my little plug about that, not only about the census, but also thanking everybody. So anyway, I think we've had a good time here tonight, and I thank you for all the support, and I'm looking forward to this upcoming year as a chairman once again, as we roll through this, and I'm looking forward to it. So I will entertain a motion at this time to adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, and a second?
Second.
All right. Motion carried.